Welcome to a quick discussion of We Love Katamari Reroll. As a fan of the series who had never played the original, I was really hoping for a remaster of this game, so now that it's finally available, I wanted to show it off. We Love Katamari Reroll caught me off guard in both good and bad ways. As someone who played Katamari Damacy Reroll and Beautiful Katamari for the Xbox 360, I was really taken aback by certain elements of this game. In a lot of ways, this feels very unique in a series known for iterative sequels. For example, the overall framework of the story. In the first game and Beautiful Katamari, a bunch of stars and celestial bodies get destroyed, so it's up to the prince to roll up objects on Earth to recreate those celestial bodies. In We Love Katamari, after the events of the first game, the prince is really popular, so a bunch of fans actually have requests for things for him to roll up. So it's a very different framework that really helps to spice up the overall gameplay, even though the core concept of the gameplay is unchanged. This is very overwhelming though, having all the cousins and all of the fans roaming around this little area. It can definitely be a little bit hard to find new missions at times, but you do have a menu like so to quickly access different missions. So let's try to jump into a mission here. Even though the story feels relatively fresh, the core gameplay is the same as always. We play as the prince, and we have a Katamari that can basically roll up various objects, and we want to basically make as big of a Katamari as possible. This is an eternal version of a stage, meaning we can basically roll to our heart's content. I do really like Katamari. My first Katamari game was Beautiful Katamari for the 360, because at the time, I'm not entirely sure if I had a working PS2, but I did have a 360, and when I found out about Katamari, I remember wanting to try it, and I found a copy for relatively cheap actually. It is actually compatible, by the way, with current gen Xboxes, by the way. It is one of the back-compatible titles for both Xbox One and Series X, as far as I remember. In general, I actually think these games are fun, kind of cathartic games. Though some missions do tend to be fairly stressful, it is nice just being able to roll around, picking up objects, and yeah, it is very cathartic. You also have a very unique art style. I really like the aesthetic of Katamari and how blocky it looks, and you also have fairly iconic music, though admittedly, I actually think I like Katamari Damacy's music better than We Love Katamari's music. In some ways, while I enjoyed We Love Katamari, I can't help but feel like it's a little bit overhyped for me. This is considered one of the best games in the series, and I thought it was really good, but I think I might like the other two better, though admittedly, that might just be because I played them first. Katamari in general does have a problem of there's only so much you can do with the core gameplay design. Basically, some games have tried to mix things up a little bit, like I think of Touch My Katamari, that used the Vita's features to basically manipulate the Katamari. You could like stretch it out so it could basically fit under certain areas, like as an example. I've never actually played that one despite owning a Vita. I don't think I was really aware of Katamari until later, and by that point I think I had already sold my Vita. One thing I actually don't like in We Love Katamari compared to the other games is the game will basically stop once you reach certain thresholds like this. It's not as seamless as the other games where you can basically just keep rolling as the king actually talks to you. He basically will stop and talk to you like so, and also tell you where you can go now that the Katamari has reached a certain size. That part is helpful though, but again, I kind of wish it didn't slow you down as much. It's not that big of a deal, it's a very minor nitpick to be honest, but it is something that stood out to me. Also, specifically because this is the Switch version, I feel like it's less optimized compared to Katamari Damacy Reroll, and I think I know why actually. This is completely conjecture, just to make that clear, but When Katamari Damacy Reroll was released, it was only released on Switch and PC at launch. This game released on all consoles and PC at launch, and I do feel like that has been a problem lately with Namco's remasters. Ever since Katamari Damacy Reroll, basically most of the other Encore titles are on everything. I think Mr. Driller might be the exception to that, if I remember correctly, but Klonoa, obviously Klonoa and this were the two that were multi-platform on day one, and these are the two that have really not turned out super well on Switch, and that's a bummer to me as a huge Klonoa fan, that the performance is pretty choppy, and at the end of the day, these are basically remasters of PS2 games in both cases, and especially with Klonoa 1, essentially a Wii game, so it shouldn't run this poorly on Switch, I feel. Another thing worth mentioning is I'm pretty sure the way Katamari Damacy was built, the remaster is capped to 30 FPS on all platforms, but for We Love Katamari, I've heard that the other versions are actually uncapped, meaning they can actually get to 60 FPS. I would probably recommend those other versions, to be honest, just because even with the 30 FPS cap, there are some dips from time to time in dense areas as the Katamari starts to get bigger, so if you have the other platforms like a PS5 or a Series X, I would probably recommend playing it there instead. Personally, I actually do like the portability of the Switch, so I usually will opt for Switch versions if they don't run too badly, and to be honest, this is at an acceptable performance level for a game like Katamari. I do feel like it was a bigger deal with Klonoa just because of the nature of a 2D platformer versus Katamari, which kind of works fine at 30 FPS because it's not really a game that requires a lot of really fine-tuning and fast response times, basically. It would have been nice to have had a slightly more stable frame rate. I almost feel like games like this would benefit from starting with the Switch and PC as lead platforms, and then get ported to PS and Xbox later on. Katamari Damacy Reroll was released in 2020 actually for the PlayStation and Xbox consoles at the time. I actually don't know if there were dedicated versions for the PlayStation 5 or not. I don't know if the PS5 and Series X would have actually been out by that point, actually, so they probably would have just been back-compatible versions, but either way, I'm pretty sure those also run well from what I've heard, and frankly, Katamari is a series that is very charming and fun, so I just hope that this game does well. Frankly, I had this exact same fear with Reroll. This is, believe it or not, the second time a Katamari remaster has released the same day as the biggest fighting game of the respective year. Katamari Damacy Reroll was released the same day as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and We Love Katamari Reroll was released the same day as Street Fighter 6. So I don't know how it happened twice, but yet it happened, and I do hope this game doesn't get too overshadowed. Though to be fair, that being said, I'm not entirely sure what they can do from here. So, there aren't that many Katamari games to begin with. After this, there was the PSP game, Me and My Katamari, which I'm actually not sure how that would work. I suppose you could use assets from the other two remasters and basically rebuild Me and My Katamari for an HD console, but I feel like that'd be a lot of work. Conversely, again, Beautiful Katamari is back compatible on Xbox, so personally, I feel like I don't have as much of a need for a Beautiful Katamari remaster compared to these other two that were originally PS2 games. After that, actually one interesting detail is Beautiful Katamari was originally planned for the PS3. I'm pretty sure it released around 2007 or 2008, I actually don't remember which, but because at that point, with the cell processor, the PS3 was a headache to develop for, and because frankly it was $600, no one was really rushing out to buy a PS3 at the time, they ended up canceling it and making a separate game a little bit later, basically, and that was Katamari Forever. And Katamari Forever is a really weird game. I have not played it myself, but I have seen some of it, and I'm not entirely sure if they should remaster that. I'm a little bit torn. On one hand, the PS3 is a very difficult console for emulation, for example, so in a way, it would actually be nice to have a modern port or a remaster of Katamari Forever for the sake of preservation, but on the other hand, Katamari Forever, again, in a series known for being fairly iterative, it's basically a greatest hits. There are a couple of original levels, but a lot of Katamari Forever, to my understanding, is essentially a remix set of stages and concepts from Katamari Damacy through Beautiful Katamari. So as a result, I feel like if you remastered all of the actual games that Forever is borrowing from, that might be sufficient, but again, for things like story, and again, a couple of exclusive levels, it almost would be nice to have Forever on modern platforms, even though again, it would almost be kind of redundant, to be honest. Again, I'm really not sure why the game has to stop you like this. Again, as far as I remember, the previous game didn't actually do this. Another thing worth mentioning is, I feel like with Katamari, in general, I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't lump these together, because we got like Klonoa as like a 2-game set. I kind of feel like Katamari Damacy Reroll was kind of testing the waters for remastering old Namco games, but I almost wish they had been bundled together because they are very fundamentally similar. In general, this has also caused some problems from what I gather. I am not a Katamari expert, and especially on this game that I'm only playing for the first time as of this playthrough, but with some of the hardcore Katamari fans on social media, I've learned that there are a few issues with this remaster, like sound effects being wrong, apparently with more modern designs of some of the cousins being used. Some of the character descriptions actually don't match anymore, so some slight oversights like that. And again, just the Switch version not particularly running well. This remaster was seen as kind of a letdown by really hardcore Katamari fans. As a casual Katamari fan, I did enjoy this game quite a bit, but again, I almost feel like 3 games into the series, it is actually starting to lose its luster a little bit just because of how samey the core formula is. Again, as a catharsis, just fun, chill, and vibe kind of game, it is entertaining still to just be able to like roll up a giant ball of a bunch of different objects around each area, but again, there's only so much you can really do with it. After Katamari Forever, there was Touch My Katamari, which was the Vita game, which used the, I actually don't know if it used both the back panel and the touchscreen, or if it just used one or the other, but yeah, you can use the touchscreen, or the touch features, to basically, like, squash and stretch the Katamari for various purposes. I've heard that game is really underwhelming, though again, each Katamari game scores slightly worse than the last, with the exception of We Love Katamari and Katamari Damacy Reroll. Reroll actually scored really well, and I think it's partly just because it had been so long since we had gotten anything Katamari that it kind of felt fresh again, but I almost feel like Reroll hasn't gotten much buzz because of games like Street Fighter releasing the same day, and also just because, again, there's only so much you can do to keep this franchise fresh, and again, that's kind of why it went away in the first place, was just, it kind of ran out of steam, just because they were kind of running out of ideas to mix things up. There's only so much you can do. If they do remaster the others, which I hope they do, I would still be interested. Like, it would be nice to be able to play Beautiful Katamari on another platform, for more people who don't want to have an Xbox, basically. But as someone with an Xbox, I don't really need it, but I might support it anyway just because I like Katamari. And I'd be curious in Forever, just because I'd be curious to see the remix stages, even though, again, the game kind of lacks in original content, which is kind of a bummer. I'm actually not sure about Touch My Katamari, how much that draws from the other games, or if it's also kind of a lot of remix stages like Forever. Also, I'm pretty sure Katamari, Beautiful Katamari was actually planned for the Wii at one point, but they couldn't get it to work with the motion controls, which is actually really funny in hindsight because the Switch version of Katamari Damacy, and I would think Reroll as well, actually do allow motion controls using Joy-Cons, where instead of using the left and right control sticks to manipulate the Katamari, you can basically move the Joy-Cons. Would I recommend playing the game like that? Probably not, if I'm being honest. That feels incredibly clunky to me. I think I tried it a little bit with Katamari Reroll, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. But again, this remaster is only $30, similar to Katamari Reroll at launch. I would recommend trying it if you're interested, just because this is a series that, in my opinion, is super underrated. I do find these series very charming and very enjoyable, and just kind of fun wind-down games that aren't like super high stakes, but just a nice little fun diversion. They aren't super long. Like, this game took me maybe like 6 or 7 hours to get through the main story, though I still have a couple of bonus missions left. And also, hence the name, We Love Katamari plus Royal Reverie, they also added in some bonus missions featuring a young version of the King of All Cosmos. I've played a couple of those. They're pretty standard, to be honest, but it's kind of interesting actually getting essentially new Katamari content in this remaster. But yeah, as the Katamari is getting bigger, you can definitely see the frame rate start to take a hit here, so I would potentially recommend another version, unless Switch is your only option, though again, as someone who just likes the portability of it, it's really not that big of a deal. In general, I kind of feel like now that I've gotten my most wanted Namco remasters now, with this and Klonoa, I'm actually not sure what to expect next from the Encore line. Encore being the Japanese name for a lot of these remasters, including the Mr. Driller remaster along with Klonoa. The original leak of a bunch of games happened because of like Klonoa Encore being trademarked in Japan, and there was a lot of hoping that was real for many years, and again hoping that this was real. When this showed up in a direct not long ago, this was really exciting because unlike Klonoa, I'm pretty sure this hadn't leaked, or at least I didn't hear about it, so this was a genuine surprise, though something I was really hoping for. So, in terms of Namco remasters, obviously the next one is actually Switch exclusive, Baten Kaitos 1 and 2, so I'm really hoping, because of that, similar to Katamari Reroll, that the Switch version will be good for Baten Kaitos, as someone who really wants to play it, and supposedly Monolith is involved with it, so hopefully that turns out well whenever it comes out. But after that, I'm not entirely sure what I want to see next in terms of like old Namco properties remastered. Obviously, I'd love to see more Tales of games, but after Symphonia, I can't say I have the highest hopes. I'd love to see a remaster of like some of the older games, like Tales of Destiny, Tales of Eternia, even like a modern like remake, like Tales of Fantasia would be fantastic. Like, basically making it a modern, like, CG-style Tales of game. I think that would be fantastic. But again, that'd be a lot of work, so I think something like Abyss or even, like, Exilia would be a lot more likely. But again, I'm really hoping there's a Tales remaster in terms of Namco properties, or obviously the elephant in the room right now is Xenosaga. I would definitely want a Xenosaga remaster if Baten Kaitos does well. Whenever that comes out, I hope it sells well, just to hopefully get a Xenosaga collection, because I really want to play those games. Especially for reasons I can't talk about, actually, now that I'm saying this out loud. Yeah, in general, if Katamari seems fun, I do recommend both Katamari Reroll and We Love Katamari Reroll. If you have an Xbox, I would also recommend Beautiful Katamari as well. But this is just a very fun series, and it's good to see it still getting new content, even after a very long hiatus following Touch My Katamari and a ton of mobile games. But that about sums up my thoughts on this remaster, so thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for another discussion.